Data binding is a concept often used in higher level languages. You can talk about Python or JavaScript for linking UI elements to data sources in a way that updates automatically. Now, C is a lower level language and it doesn't have built-in support for such abstractions. However, we can simulate data binding through a careful use of pointers and function pointers to achieve similar functionality. In this video, we will simulate a module view controller pattern, normally called MVC. This diagram presents a typical MVC pattern. We have the model which holds the data of whatever entity we are talking about. It could be anything that we want to store data about. The view displays the data to the user, and on top of that we have the controller which serves as a middle ground between both the model and the view. So when there is new data, the controller takes it and updates the model, and automatically it will notify the view so that the view will display the newly acquired data. Now go ahead and create a simple C file. First we include stdio. We also include stdlib. We need time because we'll be using sleep function, and we will also include unistd header file. After we have included the header file, we will go ahead and declare a few constants. Then we will start with the function declaration. So first, in this project we are basically going to simulate measurement of temperature using the MVC model. So let us declare a constant for the number of sensors that we'll be using. We can do sensor count, let's say 3 sensors, and also we will declare a log file where we will log all the temperature values. Then we can just give it a name, temperature.txt. Now because of the name we've given it, this file will be created right in the current directory. Once we have the constants, let us forward declare the functions that we will use in this project. First, the model, we can write a comment holds the temperature data and the thresholds. Now this will be a data type, so we will just call it struct model. Now for our view, as we said, the view will display the temperatures data and logs it. We can add a comment, which means that we need to declare a function that will update the view. So in this we will use a function pointer here. So we can say view update function, and as parameter it will take array of temperatures and also the number of sensors. We can do this float array and int. Because we are forward declaring it, we don't have to give them names. Now we can also add a function that will display the temperature. We can do display temperatures, and also this will take float of temperatures. Once again, we don't need to bring the name, but we can just bring it so that we know there is no difference. Then we can add the last function to log the temperatures, and once again float temperatures as parameters and the number of sensors, that is int count. These are all the functions that we need for the view part. Now the controller, as we said, it sits between the model and the view, and it updates the model and also notifies the view that there's a new data. We will have a struct for that, a struct controller. We will define the struct later in the video. Now we can forward declare a function that will check the threshold so that we know that the temperature that we have recorded is either higher or lower than the threshold. We can do check thresholds. We will pass a pointer to the controller as a parameter. Okay, we can create the next function that will actually update the temperature. This function will update the model with the new values, and we will pass controller to it and also the new temperatures that we want to be updated. We also need to declare some utility function. Because this project is about simulation, we need to write a utility function that will simulate a temperature sensor, and also we write a function that will allow the user to set the threshold. That will be for the user interface. Utility function read temperature sensors, and we will pass float temperatures to it. And this function, let's say user interface, it will allow the user to set the threshold. Void set thresholds. and within here we will pass a pointer to the model. Very simple. These are all the functions that we will be defining in this project. We can go ahead and define all the functions. We start with the first one. Let us define the structs for the model. Let's make a type div with the struct model and an instance called model. As we said, this is going to hold the data, so it will have a float for temperatures, which will be an array, and the size of the array will be the sensor count that we declared above. The next attribute of this struct will be the upper and lower threshold. The purpose of this threshold is to help compare the temperatures that we will measure. We define the next function. We will copy this forward declaration, paste it here, and we give it a body. This display temperature is part of the view. It will print the current temperatures to the user. We can do printf current temperatures. We can loop through the temperatures that we have recorded and print them to the user. We declare a for int like that, e++. Then we call the printf function. Because the temperatures are float values, we can print float values with 2 decimal places. We can add Celsius. Then we call I. Once we are done, we can print a new line. The next function is the log temperature. We do the same thing. The peculiar thing about the log temperature function is that the temperatures that we will measure from our sensor device, or in this case our simulated temperatures, we will write them to the file that we created above right here. We will create a pointer to the file. We call the inbuilt fopen function. We can pass the file and we want to append. Now if you scroll to the top of our pages here, we have already declared a file name here and we called it log file. That is what we are passing to this function. Make sure you spell it right. Capital file. Once we have the file, we can check if indeed the file was open by comparing it to null. It means that if the file is equal to null, we were not able to open it. We got an error, then we need to return. If this if statement is not called, it means that the file was successfully opened, so we can create a for loop here and we write all the temperatures into the file. E less than count, e++. We call the fprintf function. First we pass the object that we want to write the file to and temperature A. It will loop through the temperature and write everything into it. Once we are done, we can write a new line. And after writing a file, make sure that you close the file. And that is it for the log temperatures. We are done with the view here. The next function will be the check thresholds and update temperatures. Copy them, come here and give them bodies just like that. We will pass a pointer to the controller struct. The controller struct has already been forward declared here. Before doing this, just as we did for the model, we can also define the structure for the controller. Let us do it right beneath this. Type def struct controller and an instance called controller. Now I want us to take a look at the MVC model. We said that the controller updates the model when new data comes in, and also it notifies the view, which means that the structure of the controller should contain a variable to the model, and also it should contain that function that will notify the view, right? The view update. So inside the controller, we can add a pointer to the model and also the function pointer that we declared here, this function pointer. We will create an instance of this view update. Once we are done with it, we can complete the check thresholds. We will loop through the temperatures that we've already recorded and compare them to upper threshold and lower threshold. Start with a for loop, int equals to 0, int less than sensor count, e++. If controller, now the controller is a pointer, so we need to do this model.temperatures. If this value is greater than controller.model.upper threshold. If this is the case, then it means that the recorded temperature is higher than the threshold. We can do printf alarm, then we pass in the temperature, controller.model the temperature. We can also check for the lower threshold. This time we can say that temperature is lower than lower threshold. Let us write the function for the updating temperatures. Now this function, we passed a pointer to the controller and also a float of the temperatures. We shouldn't forget this should be an array. Make sure you update it because we are passing all the recorded temperatures to it. This is an array of temperatures. Now if we are going to update temperature, let us take all the temperatures that has been passed and assign them to the controller. We can do a for loop once again. Controller model temperature E, then we assign it to temperatures E. To notify the view, we need to check that if controller view update is not null, you can do controller view update. We can do controller model temperatures. We can pass the array to it and the sensor count. The sensor count is a global variable, so we can call it anywhere. Now after notifying the view, then we can go ahead and log the temperatures. Very easy. We just call the log temperature function. We pass in the temperatures and the count. Controller model temperatures, then once again the sensor count. That is it. Then we can also check thresholds and we pass the controller to it. After updating temperatures, we still have the utility functions to define. Just copy both functions. Let's give them bodies. Because we are not using an actual sensor, we are going to simulate the readings of a sensor, let's say thermometer. We are going to use a random value. That is why we included the time.h header file. So we can do a for loop. Now how many temperatures are we going to read? It depends on the number of sensors that we have. For int is equal to 0, int less than sensor count e++. Then here we call this temperature, which is empty. Now we are going to fill it with simulated sensor values. We call the rand. We divide the rand by rand mass, which is inbuilt function. Then we can multiply it by 50 and subtract 10 from it. And don't forget, this is supposed to be an array. Go to the top and correct that. The read temperatures function here. This is an array. Okay. We call the read function and it will fill this with simulated values. After doing that, we can set the threshold. Now the threshold that we set, it will be a user interface and it will give the user an opportunity to set upper and lower threshold to whatever he wants. Here we can tell the user enter upper threshold. We can use the scanf to get the value that the user is entering. Once we have the float, we set that to the upper threshold. Then we will tell the user to enter the lower threshold. Now with this, we have completed the entire function. The next thing to do is to write the main function from which the program execution will begin. So we will do int main return 0. We will start by initializing a random C. We will then initialize the model. After initializing the model, we can also initialize the controller. And then we allow the user to set thresholds and finally simulate the temperature monitoring. Alright, with the first one, we can call the srand, which is an inbuilt function, and we pass time with 0. With the model, we create an instance of the struct model, then we will assign values to the various parameters. Now, since the temperature is an array, we can quickly loop through the temperatures and set all of them to 0 initially. Then we can do model.temperatures is equal to 0.0 f. After doing this, we can set the upper and lower threshold as well. So giving them initial values, we can do model upper threshold. We can set the upper to, let's say, 30.0 and the lower threshold to 0. The next thing is to define an instance of the controller struct, just as we've done for the model. Controller.model, and since we've already defined an instance of the model, we can just set it to model. The view update function, so we can set that to the display temperature function. After setting up the controller, now we can allow the user to set the thresholds, and this should be very simple since we've already defined the set threshold function right here. We will call it and pass a pointer to the model to it as an argument. We call the function, and inside we can pass a pointer to the model that we have created. And the last thing to do is to simulate the temperature monitoring. This simulation is very simple. The number of times we want this whole program to run, we will do a for loop here. Let's say we want to measure for about 10 times. We create an array for temperatures, sensor count. Then we will call the read temperature function that we declared. It takes temperature as an argument. After reading the temperature, then we need to update it. So we call the update temperature function, and the update temperature function takes a pointer to the controller and also the new temperatures that we've read. So we can pass a pointer to the controller and also the temperatures that we have just read right here. Now we can call sleep. Let's say sleep 1, just a delay, right, to simulate real-time monitoring. And that is it for this program. Now, once we are done with defining the flow of the program, you can go to where your C file is located and compile it. So I'll go to my terminal. I'll do ls. You can see that is my main.c file. So I'll do gcc main.c. Okay, great. Now we are getting some errors. Let's see. Saying main20 must use struct tag to refer to type controller. Here must use struct tag to refer to controller, struct tag to refer to the model. And also we are calling a printf and passing a float here, expecting a value, but we didn't give it any value to replace that placeholder. So go back to the code and let's fix this. Now when we go to the forward declaration of the functions, the controller is a struct, but it says we cannot do it like that. I'm not so sure, but we can fix that. Put struct in front of this, and also we can put struct right here. This should fix the problem. And the last one, where we are printing a float but not passing any value for the placeholder, right here, alarm temperature is below lower threshold, so we need to give it the value, which is controller.model temperature, and because it's an array, we get that specific value. Okay, having done that, let's go back and run it again. Let's clear it. gcc main.c. okay, the program compiled successfully. We have been given the executable file, so we just run it. And the first thing is asking you to enter upper threshold, so I'll say 60. Enter lower threshold, I'll say 20. Now when I click enter, it will loop through the number of times that we call inside the main function, which was 10, and it will compare the temperatures that it will get. This brings us to the end of this tutorial about data binding in C, how we can automatically update view when we get new values for the model.